now this morning with Geoff Cruz from Forsythes Recruitment and Forsythes HR. Looking forward to having a chat with you this morning.
Thanks, Nicole. It's nice to be here. Beautiful day.
It is a beautiful
day. Welcome to Newcastle.
It's lovely in Newcastle.
It is
Been out
nice.
for a walk this morning. Gorgeous place to live.
You won't want to leave.
So tell me a little bit about where Forsythes began. Where does the story start?
Forsythes began in the 1950s. How long have you got?
No, I've got about
It started in the 1950s as a chartered accounting practice, and then it grew for a few decades, and then in the 1980s diversified into other services to service a growing client base. Those services included a recruitment division, and there were others including IT, training and variations within accounting like audit, financial planning, etc. We continued to grow as a firm, and then got to about 150 staff and a fairly diversified practice under one chartered accounting partnership. And to facilitate continued growth, we split the business between the partners, and myself and Paul Hankinson took the recruitment business and set it up as an independent firm. And we've grown from there, still under the Forsythes brand, which the other business units also still have. So there's a lot of communication, shared services and things between us still. But it just enabled us to grow in our own way. And obviously the recruitment business is a fairly mature industry now, and needs to run a little bit differently to, say, an accounting practice, for example.
Absolutely.
So I've been there 18 years, I think, last count. I know, wow's right. It's a long time.
It is. And where do you operate? So where are the office? You've got more than one office? Where are you located?
Yes, so I spend most of my time here in Honeysuckle, Newcastle, but we've got an office in Singleton, one in Tuggerah and one in Macquarie Park, North Ryde.
So what's the difference between the different offices? Obviously Singleton, very different to Macquarie Park.
Yes.
Different services on offer in each of the different offices. How does it work?
They're the same services, but you're right, they're very different offices, certainly in terms of their clients. Singleton, obviously very exposed to the mining industry, and it's been exciting times up there in recent years, as I'm sure you know. Newcastle is a different market again. We're obviously exposed to mining also, but nowhere near to the extent that Singleton is. The coal chain generally, and of course you're looking at Newcastle Harbour, is quite significant in this town. There's a lot of associated industries that hang off it. But nonetheless still a diversified city, and becoming increasingly so. Central Coast, totally different again. Virtually no exposure to the mining industry or coal chain, but hugely successful in its own right, and exposure to different industries like distribution, FMCG come to mind, and there's some notable brands there. And Macquarie Park, even different again. You know, you're talking more technology, pharmaceutical, and some emerging businesses, and indeed that whole Western Sydney belt. Our business is 45 staff split across 10 niches, and obviously each niche will, I suppose, be influenced by those different geographies in terms of which industries are bigger than others. But yes, the same service certainly gets spread across all four offices, but it's certainly a tale of four cities in terms of who's doing what at any particular time. And that's, I think, as an owner, Nicole, one of the strengths of the business. You know, it would be nice to have everything firing all at once, but the
Never
reality
goes that way though, does it?
The reality is of business, and indeed the geography, the differences between geographies means that we've got a fairly fluid workforce, such that we can have people working on different projects geographically as needed, and that means across those regions we've got a fairly robust business.
So that must differentiate you from some of your competitors in this space too, but having the ability to use team from different offices on different projects as needed.
We've been quite fortunate. The recruitment industry has changed significantly, certainly over the last 10 years, and in those early years it was much more common to be a generalist and just recruit across a range of categories. And indeed, my background 18 years ago was, well, whatever came in, I recruited it really.
Yep.
Certainly within our sector, that's in and around sort of corporate and technical and blue collar.
I think that's indicative of a startup as well in that space.
Well, that's true too, yeah. But as the industry's matured, there's a need to offer to employers something far greater than just a recruitment process. And indeed, the recruitment process can be handled by arguably anyone,
Yep.
Depending on how you define the process, of course. But to then deliver something beyond a process in terms of real niche expertise, so people that specialise in those markets, is something that we've really been, I suppose, furthering down the path of for at least the last 6 or 7 years.
Right.
But to your question in terms of competitors, I suppose where we fit, Nicole, is there's some fairly well-known corporates nationally, and they also have the luxury of some depth in each of their chosen recruitment niches. And then at the other end, you've got some really micro niche, some
boutique.
startups,
Yeah,
very boutique, who will just do one sector of the market. And of course, they're locally owned. The owners are heavily involved in those businesses and very active. I suppose one of the differences about Forsythes is where we like to think we've got the benefit of both worlds. So we've certainly got the depth and breadth of service, and we've got some expertise built into each of those. That means we're really able to offer something special as far as some real recruitment specialisation. But the owners are still heavily involved. Obviously I'm one of them, but there are 5 others and spread across the 5 offices. And so that local service and ownership, we still walk the streets and see our clients regularly. And so our reputation and what we do Monday to Friday and beyond is important to us.
Very good. So you no ivory towers at Forsythes?
No ivory towers, no. Sometimes I wish there were some, because I wouldn't mind sitting in one from time to time. But no, there's not any ivory towers.
So tell me a little bit about what your clients would say about you.
Certainly the brand has come, if you think back to its chartered accounting foundations, I don't think we've ever lost that professional, white collar, trustworthy. And you know what? I think there's probably an element of almost sort of long-standing, in this town, a brand that's been around for that time.
Something to be proud
means
of.
something? Yeah, that's right. So I think you still find a lot of those sorts of perceptions around the brand, certainly between the Hunter and Central Coast. I might add, Macquarie Park North Ryde, we've only been down there 12 months, so if you'd ask people down there what that brand means, you wouldn't get that feedback.
Well, I've just come from a breakfast here with the Hunter Business Chamber.
Yes.
And I've thrown your name around.
Okay, how'd that go?
There were nearly everybody that I mentioned, you two knew you. So it's obviously a very well recognised brand in this territory. So well done there.
Yeah, oh, thank you.
Yeah, so that's great. And so what kind of industries do you like working in? You mentioned mining up in Singleton, and the logistics and warehousing down in
Correct.
What's your ideal client look like these days?
Nicole, I suppose when you're talking about such a diversified business that are in so many industries and across those 10 niches that I've talked about, the ideal client varies. I think if you were to park industry, you talk more about their values and culture. Obviously, when you put industry, niches and specialisation to one side, what we do is all about people. And I know when we're recruiting staff, and certainly people that are new to the industry, you work very hard to try and paint the picture that this industry is just 110% about people.
Yeah.
And people, as I'm sure you know, dealing with people can give you, I think, your greatest highs.
The greatest joy in life.
Absolutely, and the greatest levels of satisfaction.
Disappointment.
Well, I was going to go there, but they can also let you down.
They can.
And, I would suggest that in our industry you'll experience both, because, you're dealing with people, their emotions, their careers, decision making, and of course we're also dealing with business and business changes also. So to your question, I think the best answer would be we love to work with organisations and employers that value their people and want to come on that journey with us in terms of identifying someone that really fits and helps them succeed. And that can be across industries. It can be large, small, and do you know, my personal expertise and the niche I specialise in is executive search, and a lot of the work I seem to be doing in recent years is with owners or boards, but certainly in recent months, mostly owners who are thinking about stepping back, you know, sort of getting into, and it's not uncommon. You think about some of the demographics in terms of ageing population and things, and they're looking for a CEO or a successor, someone to take the business forward for them. And I suppose I'm answering it personally now, but to talk to someone who's owned a business for 20, 30 plus years about their baby, and identify someone who is going to look after their baby beyond them, that's, I still think, probably one of my favourite conversations.
I can tell.
Yeah.
Just from listening to you and looking at your face as you're talking about it, you're coming alive.
Yeah, it's very powerful to talk to someone about their baby, you know, and as you can imagine, talk to someone that's owned a business, and I am one, about what their successor looks like. That's an emotional conversation, that's a strategic conversation, it's many.
Absolutely.
And it's exciting.
And tell me about the HR side of the business. So recruitment's one side of it, but then there's also the other HR services. So what are you doing in that space?
So within our 10 niches, obviously I've mentioned executive, there's engineering, accounting, sales, marketing and digital tech, and a few others. But one of our niches is HR. And off the back of a more traditional recruitment service within that HR niche, which was very much around sourcing and recommending HR professionals, be it for permanent work or contract work. That niche has evolved beyond a recruitment service to a more consulting service, where there's plenty of businesses, and you might have seen this in your own work, that are choosing to either have their own HR manager and bolt on specialist HR expertise, depending on projects or challenges, or there might be businesses that aren't quite large enough to have their own HR professional in the business, and so they'll outsource that function. Now, there's variations of those two scenarios, but what we're talking about essentially is organisations that want to outsource a part of that HR function and bring in experts. So our HR niche has evolved over the last few years to accommodate that, and so deliver not just permanent or temporary recruitment services, but HR consulting across a range of areas that we can do either in-house, and we've employed some of our own HR professionals, or we engage with specialists and
who come in and do
that's
it for
right,
you.
Work with them on projects and pull it together in terms of if there's, say, a specialist from outside, us from inside.
So what kind of, give me an example of a couple of those kinds of projects. So restructures? Or
Yeah, I must admit, we've just put someone on who specialises. Well, actually, we're dealing with two people at the moment. One who's just joined us as a permanent staff of our own, and someone who's come on more part-time contract. Now, the part-time contract professional, she's lovely, and she specialises in mediation. And so there's some projects going on there. The other lady who's just joined us, she is an HR business partner, comes out of a large technical organisation, funnily enough, in Macquarie Park, North Ryde, and has worked on a range of HR projects, and particularly around restructuring and growth and accommodating the HR policies that go along with that.
Fantastic. So full service now then.
Yeah, and I think, Nicole, it's worth noting, one thing that Space also has done a bit in recent years, and I'm thinking particularly in the Valley and what's happening in the mining industry, is doing a lot of career transition consulting for organisations that are either redeploying staff.
Yes.
And Forsythes has an IT business where we're doing some retraining there, but also for staff that have chosen to exit organisations, helping them pull together their skills, put them into something that they can then take to another industry, and helping them make that transition, which we call outplacement.
The amount of career transitions that people are having these days throughout their working life, that's going to be a great area to I think, specialise in, and I can see growth in that area for sure for your business.
Yeah, we hope so, and we think so too. And you're right, there's a lot of change out there, so people getting a bit of advice on that front's helpful.
Yeah. So tell me a little bit about you now. So let's move away from Forsythes and away from work, and tell us a little bit about your life.
I'm married, 2 young children, 10 and 7. I went to Newcastle University, so I've essentially been around the Newcastle region for a long time.
What did you study at university?
So I studied psychology and enjoyed that. Did the honours year and actually started as an in-house psychologist on some research projects. And worked with some great people at the university, but realised that probably wasn't for me long term. Did some travel and worked a little bit overseas, and believe it or not, Nicole, came back from overseas, thought, what am I going to do? I thought there's probably nothing here in Newcastle, so I'll just head straight to Sydney, and was offered a role down there with a recruitment firm. And funnily enough, being a Newcastle boy, I should have realised this and not just jump straight to Sydney, but someone said, you should at least talk to people in Newcastle. I'm a surfer, I love the lifestyle here, and my preference would have always been to work here. And so met with some organisations here, one of which was Forsythes, and Paul Hankinson, who's now my business partner, said, why don't you give recruitment a try? Which for those of us perhaps in my age range, I think most of us fell into recruitment that way. Hadn't really thought about it, liked the idea of it, so let's give it a go. And here we are 18 years later,
Wow.
Nicole.
Great story. And what's the future look like for you?
I love that question. The future, there's actually a lunch coming up next week called The Future of Work in this region, and I'm excited about the future. There's, for 100 reasons. I'm involved in a couple of startups that I have an interest in terms of what they do. They're non-recruitment related, but that world of innovation and what the future looks like is quite exciting. And to answer your question more specifically, I think for us, we want to continue to grow, certainly not at the expense of our lifestyle and what we hold dear to us in terms of our families. And you know, we don't want to grow to the extent where we're seeing less of our families.
Right.
But we certainly want to grow in terms of our expertise, and that might mean a little bit more geographical growth at some point. But to my statement around the future and innovation, you know, what we're doing and who we're partnering with and what organisations are doing around the future, be it technology or how they're delivering old services in new ways, that's a space that I love to be part of.
It is exciting, isn't it?
Yeah. I think, you know, there's some brands obviously that people throw around when they talk about how businesses are changing. There's some less obvious ones right here, and they're doing some cool things, and indeed across all our offices. And working with those organisations to identify talent that, you know, come from perhaps more traditional roles, but need to transition into more futuristic jobs with titles people haven't heard of.
It's incredible,
but still
isn't it?
require some real, you know, core skills. That's exciting, and I think as we see people transition from some of those old roles to those new ones in industries that are emerging, that's where I think
it's
they're
an
really
exciting thing, isn't it? I mean, there's
Mm.
jobs that we don't even know it will exist that we'll be doing ourselves in a couple of years' time. Things you think about the way technology is changing the world so quickly.
Yes,
recruitment's an exciting space to be in.
Yeah, I think it is too.
Yeah. Well, thanks very much for being here with us today.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me, Nicole.
All the best with your business.
Thank you, and you too.